Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. This is part number 3 and the conclusion of the epic Am I the Butthole saga that we've been covering for the past 2 days. If you haven't heard the first 2 parts of this one, they're linked in the top of the description down below. I'd go listen to those first and then come back to this one. Otherwise, this one will have absolutely no context. Alright, let's jump into the conclusion of this epic story. This one is titled Update 7 Final, I Hope. December 7th, 2023, Thursday. Thursday morning, I met with my attorney, went over the agreement, changed a couple of minor things, and he sent it to my sisters and brothers-in-law. It included a requirement that they pay my attorney's fee, about $3,000. They weren't happy about that and tried to negotiate it away, but he told them they either accept it as is or there would be no deal at all, and we'd proceed with suing them for the money they got from renting out the place, wear and tear from renting it, repair costs from their break-in, emotional distress, lost income from having to deal with this, attorney fees, and whatever else we could. He also told them I would push hard with the DA's office to prosecute every charge. Short version, they came in and signed. I wasn't there. I'm told it was a pretty tense environment, that the middle brother-in-law appeared to have taken charge, and that at one point, he told both of my sisters to shut the heck up, or he was walking away from the whole thing, making his own deal with us, and the rest of them could all go to hell. They provided another cashier's check for $2,500, claimed that's all they had. It's close enough that we're going to accept it as the final payment. Attorney also told me that everyone was very cold and curt towards one another, but that they all managed to keep it together long enough to sign and left without making too big of a scene. I drove up to the vacation house early yesterday to check out the damage and meet with the DA's office. Seeing the damage made my blood boil. It was so senseless. I was so pissed that I was ready to eat the cost of repairs and do everything I could to ruin their lives. Tried walking it off, failed utterly. Ended up calling a good friend who was kind enough to stay on the phone for over an hour letting me spew and vent. He eventually got me back to focusing on the bigger picture of putting this behind me and getting on with my life. Honestly, I'm still not sure that's what I want to do, but I settled down enough to get some food in me and I felt better. After lunch, I went to the DA's office. Hadn't made an appointment and had to wait a while, but got to meet with the assistant DA who's got the case. Short version is that since I don't want to prosecute and brother-in-laws have already paid for the damages, that they are willing to drop all the charges except trespassing, which in this case will be a class 2 misdemeanor. The brother-in-laws will have to plead guilty and pay whatever fine the judge sets. I'm also told that if they fight the trespassing charge or ever so much as fart in public up there, that it would go very poorly for them. It helped that the brother-in-laws didn't resist arrest. If they had, none of the charges would have been dropped. I also went by the sheriff's office to thank them for getting there so quickly and everything. Wanted to thank the deputies personally, but only spoke to the dispatch person. And I tried to meet up with David, the property manager, but couldn't get a hold of him. A couple of notes, the agreement includes a no contact clause. Basically, if any of them show up where my wife or I are, or the other way around, whoever got there last has to leave immediately. No contact except through attorneys or other mutually agreed upon third parties. They get to keep whatever they made from renting the vacation house, my big give, unless I have tax consequences, which they will be responsible for. And we release each other from all liabilities up through the present. There's more to it than that, but those are the high points. Wife and I will sign the agreement later today. After that, I can't talk about most of this, but I can talk around it. I think this is my final update regarding all this nonsense, but I'll respond to comments if I can. As I've said before, posting about all of this and reading folks' thoughts and responses has been really helpful and has probably been key in my being able to handle this in a relatively healthy way. So, thank you all again. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called FreeComb8184. It says, I have been following your story from the start and can't believe how this all turned out. Your sisters and their husbands basically destroyed your family over their selfishness and pettiness. I feel for your parents as they are now caught in the middle and can never have their family together again for anything because of their daughters and spouses being so selfish. I will say you are better than me because I would not have dropped the charges or made the agreement you did. They would have been sued by me, especially after finding out they rented your vacation home without permission or considering the legality of it. I am usually a forgive and forget type of person, but this went way too far for that. I'm glad the legal aspect of the situation is starting to get behind, but unfortunately, this will never end due to the family dynamics it has created. I hope your parents stay understanding with you and your wife in this situation, as they have been in your previous updates. Best of luck to you, and I hope for you and your wife's sanity that this is coming to a close. OP responded to this one and said, "Thanks for the kind words. I had a hard time not being vindictive, but right now, I'm glad I wasn't. If they cause more drama down the road, I'll probably regret it, but if they follow the agreement, that won't happen. The family dynamics are, like you said, pretty much effed. I've only told my parents that we're trying to work things out, nothing more. They may or may not be okay with the way things will be moving forward, but I had to do what was best for my wife and I. I'm guessing that my sisters have told them a very slanted version, and that's just one more turd I'll have to swim around. Really, the agreement is more of a formalization of how things have been for the last few months. I know it's not how my folks wanted things to go, but I'm pretty happy with it." Another commenter down below called Tony164 said, "Did your sisters ever show this level of entitlement or stupidity before?" OP responded and said, "Not really. Not towards me anyway. We used to be okay. Never very close, but not enemies. Looking back, they started to resent me when I bought a loft when I was 25. At that point, neither of them owned a home, but both had met their future husbands. They definitely didn't like that I got a place before they did. It got worse when I met my wife. They didn't like that she was part of a wealthy family, especially since I was doing pretty well by myself then. Accused me of being elitist and such. When we got married, I moved in with my wife. Her condo was close to where she was doing her fellowship, and I sold the loft. Our wedding was fancy but reasonable, but the sisters were definitely envious about it. After that, they and their husbands got pretty petty, and we started minimizing our involvement with them. The profit from selling the loft, being frugal, and not having a house payment are what enabled me to buy the vacation home for my parents. My folks were okay with hiding the fact that I owned it instead of them, because they knew my sisters would be bitchy about it and say that I was using my wife's money. I didn't. Most of our finances are separate, though it definitely helped that I didn't have a house payment. Up until this crap started, I actually thought we were okay in the general sense. Our daily lives were and are very different, and I can't pretend I enjoy being around them for more than half a day, but I didn't think they hated me. I did know that both sisters had become pretty spoiled and entitled, but it wasn't my concern. And I didn't have any real conflicts with my brothers-in-law either, just almost nothing in common with them. I guess that's a long-winded way of saying I didn't know they were all such buttholes. Obviously there was tension between OP, the sisters, and the brother-in-law beforehand, but I want to remind everybody that the tipping point for this whole thing was a couple of kids going into a pool. How crazy is it how far this has escalated? Let's see if we can tie this up with update number 8. This update is titled March 2024, Oldest Sister and Brother-in-Law Have Filed for Bankruptcy. Thought it would be worth an update for anyone who's interested. Unsurprisingly, my oldest sister and brother-in-law have filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. While I don't care about what happens to them financially or otherwise, they've also managed to drag my parents into their mess, which I'm not happy about. At the start of the year, my brother-in-law's oversized custom Pride and Joy truck was repossessed. Pretty embarrassing for him, I'm sure. Happened at work. This was their breaking point. Without the truck, they'd have to share a Kia my parents loaned them, and they can barely fit in it with their 3 kids. Financially, they are effed. They owe at least $125,000, probably more, on high-interest credit cards. They have zero equity in their house, and have a couple of personal loans that I'm pretty certain they got under false pretenses. They have loans on their jet skis, ATVs, and trailers. They also owe a chunk of money from defaulting on the truck lease. They hadn't made any payments on their credit cards or loans in months, and were behind on their house payments as well. They got out of the lease on my sister's massive SUV late last year. They were upside down on it as well, so had to come up with cash to do so. They also had to pay an attorney, the fine, and court costs for my brother-in-law's trespassing charge at the vacation house. And they owe my middle sister and her husband money for bail and their portion of the damages to the place. As I've mentioned before, my folks have never been financial wizards, but they have at least been generally responsible. They're retired, their home is paid off, and they live off Social Security and pensions. Altogether, they get more than they spend. Minimal savings, just an emergency fund. Turns out my folks emptied out that fund, cashed out their small IRA, $20,000, and gave it to my sister. That let her catch up on the house payment and cover the negative equity on their car lease. But now, literally every bit of savings my parents possessed is gone. Plus, my parents have been paying for their groceries for several months and continue to pay the insurance on the car they loaned my sister. According to my dad, my sisters worked my mom for weeks to get her to fork over the money. They'd worked on both my folks at the same time for a while, but my dad flat out refused every time. Eventually, Mom caved. She was worried that my sister would have to move to a hovel in some backwater town and that the kids would be barefoot and eating dirt. Dad's not happy about it, and to say there's some tension between them right now is an understatement, but they'll be fine. I was pretty disappointed when my parents told me all this, but I wasn't surprised. It sucks that they emptied out their savings to help, but I kinda get it. The way the bankruptcy laws are in our state, by getting caught up on the home loan, my sister should be able to keep the house. I tried hard not to say how I felt about this and my sisters, mostly succeeded. Really, I'm way more pissed about this than I should be. The worst part for me is that my sister and brother-in-law could now contact me and my wife without any real fear of repercussions. The only penalty the no contact agreement has is that if they violate it, we can go after them for the money they made from renting out the vacation house and related damages. Since they filed for bankruptcy, that's now not an impediment for them. I'm hoping they'll leave us alone, but who knows. Folks also told me that my middle sister and her husband have hit a rough spot and that he's not currently living with her and the kids. Just a guess, but I imagine he's had it with the whole family dynamic that caused this nonsense. Not directly related, but on a brighter note, I've spent 2 weekends at the mountain house since the start of the year, once with my wife and once alone. Both times there was a lot of snow. It was incredibly beautiful and relaxing, very therapeutic. The place also has good internet service now, thanks Starlink, which is nice. Plus, knowing that I can count on David, the property manager, to keep the place in shape and ready for us to visit and help if we get snowed in, eliminates most of the stress in owning it. My folks have used it a few times as well and get along great with David. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Stray's Mom. It says, "Well, karma seems to be catching up with the wannabe Jones. I'm really sorry that your sisters grifted your parents out of their savings. Unfortunately, they are adults and chose to cave to their daughters. Can you still get an RO for harassment with your older sister and brother-in-law? They might not be bound by the signed agreement, but if they are calling, texting, or emailing you, and you don't want the contact, that might be enough to get an RO. Especially since there is already a record of brother-in-law's actions. I feel bad for you that your crazy sisters are continuing to cause mischief. Even if it isn't directly on you, it's still affecting you." OP responded to this one and said, "If they start up again, I do indeed plan to get a restraining order. In fact, my wife made it clear to me she expects a very hard approach to any BS from them going forward." Which I agree with, of course. I had the security cameras at our house upgraded at the start of the year, just in case they came by. I also kept all their previous texts and provided screenshots to my attorney for safekeeping. If they cause any trouble at the vacation house, they're toast. The sheriff's department and DA office have the full story and are sympathetic to our situation. Another commenter down below called SwissMiss77 said, "Jesus, not paying the mortgage but letting the truck get repoed? They should have sold it or given it back first. and they should have given up all the toys months ago. Instead, they just kept doubling and tripling down. Absolute insane levels of entitlement and delusion. OP responded to this one and said, "To be fair, and this is according to my parents, they tried to sell the ATVs and watercraft, but the value on those things dropped like a rock the moment you buy them, and they were upside down on the loans, so they eventually just quit paying on them." Also, this reminds me, when they broke into the vacation house, they also broke into the mini barn. Turns out my older brother-in-law had stowed his 2 ATVs in it. Just guessing, but I think he was going to take them, report them stolen, get an insurance settlement, and sell them on the sly. I found out in January that the ATVs were there and paid to have them taken to my dad's place. He had my brother-in-law pick them up from there. Also, I don't think my brother-in-law was expecting the truck to get repoed. I think he was working to catch up on the payments so they'd have one good vehicle. The finance company must have just run out of patience. Don't blame them, he's an F-up. One more comment from a user called HappyConnection5509 says, "They must have been making quite a packet from their fraudulent vacation home income for it to impact their finances to this extent." OP responded and said, "I think they were grossing at least $50,000 per year, probably more. Tax-free. It was never listed on Airbnb as far as I can tell. They'd rent to friends, friends of friends, etc. I based the $50,000 on the fact that my parents kept a calendar for the house to keep track of who was using the place. I went through the last 3 years worth of calendars, and my sisters were using the place a lot, sometimes for a week at a time. Supposedly, they were doing school-related planning retreats as well as just family time. I know similar places go for $2,000 or more per weekend, and at least $4,000 for a week. It can sleep 6 people in bedrooms and has a bunk room for kids that all 5 would stay in. Plus, it has 2 queen-size pull-out sofas. If you pushed it, you could fit more people than that. I think my sisters are just spendaholics. They constantly have the newest whatever. iPads, TVs, clothes, diets, you name it. So no matter how much they got, they'd spend more. So this was going to happen eventually. I don't think I've ever been as disappointed with an outcome as I am with this one. I feel so bad for OP's parents. I thought that the sisters and brother-in-law might have been turning a corner and things might be going the right way, but then they cleaned out the parents' financials as well. Wow. I know some of that needs to be put on the parents because they're the ones that gave the money, but come on, they're parents, these are their kids, and they don't want to see them on the streets. I'm just really disappointed that the sister went to the parents in the first place. This has been an epic tale, and I don't think it's over yet. I'll keep my eye out for more updates, and I'll let you guys know if any more pop up. Did you know every KCC video is also produced in podcast form? You can search for Karma Comment Chameleon on every major podcasting platform. I thank you for watching and listening. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.